Beijing has abandoned the Kremlin, Putin is in panic, Russia is left without allies and influence. Trump has demonstrated strength, the US is not afraid of China, dictating the rules with tariffs and military power. China continues to apply pressure, refineries are refusing Russian oil, and the Kremlin is in a state of shock. A juicy piece of Russia is passing into China's hands, and Putin is just watching. There is no resistance. I'll tell you all the details in a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. In the deal of the century, China has abandoned Moscow and Putin is left alone. Reality is harsh. China is negotiating with the US without Moscow's involvement. The geopolitical axis has collapsed like a rotten imperial stage set. Beijing has chosen profit over friendship. It is playing independently, earning on bonds at the American rate and gaining the political bonus of legitimacy as an equal partner to the US. Putin has lost everything, an ally, influence, and even the illusion of power. Moscow has turned into a raw materials appendage and toxic baggage. But are the US really more loyal to China now? And what is Trump actually planning by getting closer to the Middle Kingdom? I get along very well with President Xi, but the only way to have a good relationship with China is to act from a position of strength. The US president recalled the imposition of large-scale tariffs against China during his first term. He stated that it is precisely because of these measures that Washington has enormous leverage in its relations with Beijing.
During my first term, I imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions. I introduced tariffs on China very early on. Then COVID hit us. We fought. We handled it well, but it was COVID. It came from a certain place in China. Remember, another wonderful gift. That was another little gift that we got. But listen, I got along great with President Xi, got along great with China. But the only way to get along well with China is to act from a position of strength. We have tremendous power thanks to the tariffs. We have tremendous power because I rebuilt our military, and they have a lot of missiles, but so do we. And they don't want to mess with us. I can tell you that for sure. Who
would have thought that the US and China, former trade rivals, now seem to be playing on the same team against Moscow? A sensation right after the meeting. The US lowers tariffs for China from 20 to 10%, and Trump rated his conversation with the Chinese leader a 12 out of 10. A new global alliance is forming in which there is no longer any place for the Kremlin. This is not just a diplomatic slap in the face, it's a geopolitical execution. The US and China have put Russia in its place and rewritten the global game without it. All the details are coming up next. Don't miss it.
Donald Trump met with Xi Jinping in South Korea as part of his Indo-Pacific tour. The main topics of the meeting were trade barriers between the countries and, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war.
They moved on to a longer speech, a joint political dialogue agenda, which, in principle, is a very positive aspect of this meeting.
As a result of the meeting, the parties agreed to reduce the tariff on Chinese goods related to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid analgesic, from 20% to 10%. The overall level of US duties will reach 47%.
The fundamental issues underlying the US conflict in China, they haven't gone anywhere. And these very important issues, such as the fate of the island of Taiwan and the possibility of imposing tariffs on Chinese goods, specifically because of the purchase of Russian oil, Trump responded diplomatically, saying these issues were not raised. But in such cases, as a rule, when you don't reach an agreement, you say that you didn't discuss it.
The agreements regarding Ukraine were less productive, despite the fact that, according to the US president, Ukraine was discussed at length. At first, Trump tried to persuade Xi to reduce support for Russia so that Putin would agree to end the war. Whether the parties reached any agreement in this regard was not announced.
There is a prominent strategic cooperation dialogue between authoritarian Russia and authoritarian Beijing. And for Xi to risk that, he would have to receive something much greater and far more substantial and more meaningful in return. Something that matches the high level of relations between America and Beijing. Given that for now the relationship more closely resembles a logic of gradual de-escalatory actions in the trade and economic sphere, I would not say that a formal strategic alliance or an ongoing structured dialogue has been established between Washington and Beijing.
Donald Trump rated the meeting a 12 out of 10. By the way, this was the first meeting between the leaders of the US and China in
the last 6 numbers that we mentioned just now. Years. As for how true that really is, again, let's recall Trump's presidency. Remember at least Trump's statement that they would sort out the Middle East after 3,000 years. I'm someone who reads news from the Middle East, and what's happening there doesn't even remotely resemble achieving peace in that region. So Trump's statements about China, that everything has been agreed upon, everything is wonderful, but let's at least wait 48 hours and then we'll see.
Trump said that he had agreed with Xi Jinping on a visit to China in the spring of next year. After that, there will be a return visit by the Chinese leader to the United States. And indeed, China has quickly lost interest in Russian oil. After the new US sanctions against energy giants Lukoil and Rosneft, Chinese oil refineries began massively refusing Russian supplies. However, that's not all. China's motive? Xi has set his sights on Russian territory. More details coming up in the report.
State giants like Sinopec and PetroChina are staying on the sidelines, having cancelled some Russian shipments after last month's US sanctions against PJSC Rosneft and PJSC Lukoil. Smaller private refineries, known as teapots, are also holding back, fearing they might face similar penalties. Russia is starting to panic, a real blow to the wallet. The main buyer has started shutting off the taps. And here are the first results. Supplies have dropped by almost 400,000 barrels per day. That's about 45% of all Russian oil exports to China. And not so long ago, it was Russia that was the main oil supplier for its ally. But now everything is falling apart. The oil friendship is coming apart at the seams. China is looking for profit, not pitying the Kremlin. And it seems that the era of cheap Russian oil is coming to an end.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
And yet another powerful slap in the face for Putin. A once loyal ally has started to take over the URF region. China is turning Siberia into its own resource base. This is reported by the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine. One of the key examples is the Zashulanskoye coal deposit in Zabaykalsky Krai. Its development is being carried out by a joint venture of the Russian N+ Group, owned by Oleg Deripaska and the Chinese Shenhua Group. The extraction is planned for 100 years, and the Russian authorities have granted the company tax benefits. Starting in 2027, it is planned to transport 5 million tons of coal annually to China, which is about 500 trucks per day. A highway is being built primarily for this purpose. The jobs are going not to locals but to Chinese specialists. The machine has been set in motion. Up to 2 million Chinese citizens already live in the Far East. It seems this is only the beginning of a silent occupation. Even Baikal, the symbol of Russia's natural wealth, is gradually becoming part of Chinese economic interests, highlighting just how much Moscow has lost control over its own resource-rich regions. By the way, there's also another large oil refinery, Yangchang Petroleum. It refused to purchase Russian oil in its latest tender for crude oil supplies for the period from December to mid-February. Previously, it regularly bought Russian oil, usually one batch per month. I should add that a number of recent Western sanctions on Russian oil supplies have led Chinese state oil companies and some Indian refineries to avoid making purchases. Tensions are reaching a critical point. Russia has finally fallen out of favor in the eyes of China. Now Washington is closer to Beijing than Moscow is. Everything changed for good after the meeting between Donald Trump and Xi. Beijing and Washington are re-establishing contact, and Russia remains on the sidelines without allies and without any influence. Xi made it clear that China is ready to talk with the US and is betting on stability, not conflict.
China and America can take on shared responsibility as great powers and work together to achieve significant and concrete results for the benefit of our two countries and the entire world.
Donald Trump and Xi have finally tightened the noose around Putin's neck.
We agree that the sides, are stuck and fighting, and sometimes perhaps you have to let them fight it out. But he will help us, and we will work together on Ukraine. Babishesi
started acting according to his own plan, including regarding Russia. Behind closed doors, the Chinese leader decided the further fate of Putin's empire. The bunker dweller watches the events, no longer hiding his panic, but he can't do anything about it. Right now, a juicy piece of Russia is passing into China's hands. What will happen next? And will the head of the Kremlin dare to resist? We'll find out in just a moment. Russia is losing the Far East. Unofficially, but in reality.
The Far East, without any exaggeration, has become the most important factor in strengthening Russia's position in the world, our flagship in the new global economic reality.
While the Kremlin is busy with the war, the region is quietly being divided by its neighbors China and North Korea.
I would call this a kind of creeping takeover, creeping migration. For now, of course, control over the Far East remains in Moscow's hands, but there are more and more Chinese there, and they are playing an increasingly significant role in the economy. But as they say today, they play a big role in the economy, and tomorrow they'll play a big role in politics.
Over 1 trillion rubles in investments from China sounds like aid. But all of this revolves around trade, not the development of the region.
China needs to use Russian resources at a cheaper cost, and accordingly, they will have that opportunity. And that's why I think the economic dependence of these regions on China will only continue to grow and become increasingly important.
Also, the Chinese have long ceased to be guests in Russia.
The East is simply unnecessary. It should just be handed over to the Chinese. The Chinese can simply come in and no one will resist anymore. There will be no one to resist and nothing to resist with.
According to various estimates, up to 2 million Chinese live from Vladivostok to the Urals.
This is called settling these territories with Chinese people and in various forms. This includes both migrants themselves, for example, and mixed marriages as well. At this very moment in time, right now, in the present, this is what is happening.
About North Korea. In the past year alone, more than 15,000 North Koreans have officially arrived in the Far East and unofficially up to 50,000. And that's not the limit yet. Already 1,000
new labor contracts have been officially ordered recently. And accordingly, demographic problems still remain. So yes, there aren't enough local people. And in this regard, North Korea is an excellent supplier of labor resources because the people are disciplined and accordingly know how to march in step in every sense of the word.
So it turns out that Moscow has handed over the region for temporary use. But why?
Putin needs people who, as he sees it, are easy to deal with.
At a price. And the longer the Kremlin turns a blind eye, the more important the question becomes, who is killing us? Who is actually running the Far East?
In reality, when we consider the current state of international affairs, it is clear that today, Russia is, without a doubt, a vassal of China. This relationship is one in which China primarily takes advantage of Russia's position in order to exert pressure on Europe, using Russia as a tool to further its own interests on the European continent. Today's Russia is like a loyal, chained dog that obeys all the commands of its master.
So what happens next? Is it possible for the Far East to return to real control by Moscow? Or on the contrary, will the influence of China and North Korea only continue to grow?
The influence of China and North Korea will only increase. And accordingly, China itself will decide whether it needs to formally take all of this under its control. Or maybe it's enough to have, well, let's say complete economic control today, and tomorrow that will turn into full political control.
It seems that while Putin is focused on seizing other people's territories, he is gradually losing his own. And ironically, these territories are being taken not even by enemies, but by the Kremlin's own allies.
And what do you think about the alliance between the US and China? We look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for more important updates and don't forget to like the video. Wishing you peaceful skies above